Ivy Hollis did not cry when they called her a thief. She was 8 years old, barefoot on the cobbles of Bramfield Market Square, and the baker's wife had her by the wrist hard enough to bruise. A crust of bread lay in the mud where it had fallen. Ivy had not eaten in 2 days. She had not stolen the bread either. Not truly. She had only reached for what a kinder hand had already dropped for her. But no one in the square cared to ask which was true. They called her gutter snipe. They called her nobody's get. They called her a lesson for the other children, and they said it loud enough that the words carried over the stalls and into the lane. She stood very straight. In her free hand she held the one thing she owned outright, a stub of pencil, worn down to a nub, wrapped in a scrap of her dead father's shirt. She had used it for 2 years to mark tally strokes on broken slate, how many turnips she'd found, how many nights she'd slept dry, how many days since her mother's grave was dug. Numbers were the only thing that had never lied to her. The crowd watched. Nobody moved. A circle of Bramfield's better sort stood at a comfortable distance, close enough to enjoy the spectacle, far enough not to be splashed by it. Then a man went still. He had been crossing the square toward his waiting carriage, tall, dark-coated, unremarkable to anyone who did not know to look for a duke in plain travelling clothes. He did not shout. He did not sweep in with outrage. He simply stopped walking. And something in his stillness was louder than the baker's wife's voice had been. He looked at the girl's hand, not her face, her hand, at the pencil stub gripped white-knuckled inside it, and something in his own face changed. Wiltshire, England, the autumn of 1801. If a story like hers has already found its way past your defences this early, that is exactly the kind of story worth staying for, so subscribe to the channel now, and let's see where it takes her. The baker's wife let go of Ivy's wrist only when the man asked her to, quietly, the way one asks a door to open rather than kicks it in. His name was Alaric Vane, Duke of Ashworth, and he had buried his wife 11 months before in a churchyard not 4 miles from where he now stood. He did not know why he had stopped. He would spend years telling himself it was decency and nothing more. He crouched to the girl's level, which no one in that square had done. "What is your name?" he asked. "Ivy," she said. "Ivy Hollis." "And the bread?" "Wasn't mine. I never said it was." She lifted her chin, and the pencil stub did not shake in her hand, though the rest of her wanted to. "I don't lie about small things. I've no use for it." He almost smiled. It was the first almost smile Bramfield had seen from him since the funeral, and it lasted less than a second, and only Ivy saw it happen. He did not ask the parish for her. He did not send a solicitor to arrange it properly, not that day. He simply told the baker's wife that the debt for the bread, real or imagined, was settled, and he told the girl to come with him if she wished it, and he made it plain, flatly, without warmth, because warmth was not a thing he trusted himself with any more, that this was not charity and she owed him nothing for it. "I don't take things I haven't earned," Ivy said. "Then you may earn your keep," he said. "I have a house with too many empty rooms and a steward who cannot keep a column straight. Perhaps in time you'll be of use to me." It was not a courtship. It was not even a kindness dressed as one. It was 2 grieving creatures, one small and one large, recognizing something in each other that neither had words for yet, and it began, as most things in that house eventually would, with a plain, unromantic bargain, stated once, and never repeated. What neither of them knew, what the audiences owed and the household was not, was that Ashworth's steward, a narrow, careful man named Josiah Pratt, had been altering the estate ledgers for 6 years already, a little more each season, and that the numbers had stopped lining up long before anyone thought to look. Pratt kept 2 books. He showed the Duke one of them. Ivy Hollis, who noticed numbers the way other children noticed faces, would grow up in that house without ever being told the second book existed. She would simply one day feel the wrongness of it in her hands before she understood it in her head. The Duke was not cold. He was tired. There is a difference, and the house would spend 15 years learning it. His grief had frozen somewhere between the nursery that was never filled and the portrait gallery he no longer walked through after dark. He gave Ivy tutors, not affection, Latin and figures, and the management of a household ledger, because those were things he knew how to give without risking anything of himself. The housekeeper, a blunt, iron-backed woman named Mrs. Prynne, took one look at the child's chapped hands and declared her a project worth keeping. "She'll want feeding first, Mrs.," Prynne told the Duke, "and manners after. In that order, Your Grace, not the other way round." He nodded. He did not argue with women who were right. Ivy learned quickly that Ashworth Hall ran on 2 currencies, what was said aloud and what was carried in silence. The Duke rarely raised his voice. He rarely lowered it either. He spoke to her the way he spoke to his solicitor, plainly, and she came to understand that this was, from him, a kind of respect. "You are not a ward in the ordinary way," he told her once, when she was 10, and had asked him outright why he had chosen her out of every beggar child in Wiltshire. "I am not raising you to be grateful. Gratitude curdles. I am raising you to be capable. That will serve you longer. Is that why you don't smile?" she asked. "Because it might curdle too." He looked at her for a long moment. "Perhaps," he said, and something at the corner of his mouth moved before he caught it. She counted that as the second almost smile. She had begun keeping a private tally of them, the way she once tallied turnips, though she would not have admitted it to anyone, least of all herself. Pratt watched the girl grow up with a wariness he was careful never to show the Duke. A homeless child turned ward was a novelty easily dismissed. A homeless child turned ward with an unnatural gift for numbers was a different matter, and by the time Ivy was 12, she had begun trailing after the estate clerk on rent days, watching the columns fill, asking questions that were too specific for a child simply curious about arithmetic. "Why does the West tenancy pay more than the East?" she asked once, "when the East has better soil?" The clerk did not know. Pratt, passing through the estate office at the wrong moment, did, because the West tenants are behind on repairs, Pratt said smoothly. And the difference covers the shortfall. It will balance itself in time, Miss Hollis. Ledgers always do, if you leave them be. She did not leave them be. She never had. But she filed the discrepancy away the way she filed everything, quietly, without accusation, waiting for enough of them to add up to a certainty rather than a suspicion. By 15, she was keeping the household accounts herself, officially, with the Duke's blessing, and Mrs. Prynne's fierce approval. By 16, she had caught 2 small errors in Pratt's figures, and corrected them without comment, and Pratt had thanked her too warmly for something so small, which told her more than the errors had. The Duke noticed the corrections before Pratt could bury them. He said nothing to Pratt. He said one thing to Ivy in the library late, with the ledger open between them on the desk. "You found this in an afternoon," he said. "My steward has managed my accounts for 9 years. Numbers don't get tired of being watched," she said. "People do." He almost smiled a third time. She did not stop counting. She was 19 when she told him, plainly over breakfast, that she would not be accepting the allowance he had proposed, increasing that quarter. "You've done nothing to warrant refusing it," he said. "I've done the accounts for 4 years without complaint," she said. "That's not why I'm refusing it. I'm refusing it because I don't want it thought I'm here for what you give me. I'm here because I chose to stay, not because I couldn't afford to leave. There's a difference, and I'd rather you saw it than assumed it." He set down his cup. "You could leave. You have the training now to keep books for any house in England." "I could," she agreed. "I haven't." He did not ask her why, and she did not tell him, though the answer had been sitting quietly in her chest for over a year by then, unexamined. The way a person avoids touching a bruise to confirm it still hurts. 2 more years passed the way years do in a well-run house, counted in quarter days and harvest tallies, in the slow accretion of small proofs. Ivy turned 21 in the spring, came fully into her own small inheritance of competence and independence, and stayed at Ashworth anyway, now not as a ward, but as the woman who kept its books, its tenants' trust, and, though no one said it aloud, a portion of the Duke's attention that had belonged to no one since his wife died. It was that spring Lady Beatrice Sorrel decided the girl had gotten above herself. Lady Beatrice hosted the county's largest dinner each May, and that year, for the first time, Ivy Hollis was seated at it, not at the foot of the table among the governesses and companions, but midway down, where the Duke had quietly instructed she be placed. It did not go unnoticed. How novel, Lady Beatrice said, loudly enough to carry, to see the Duke's charity case dining among her betters. The room did not go silent so much as it leaned in, the particular hush of people pretending not to listen while listening entirely. Ivy set down her fork. "I manage his accounts, my lady, not his charity." "A bookkeeper," Lady Beatrice said, as though the word were something scraped off a boot, playing at gentility. "I balanced Ashworth's ledgers to the shilling this quarter," Ivy said, "found £11 unaccounted for in the West Tenancy, and returned it to the estate rather than let it go quietly missing, as it had for 3 years before I arrived at the books. I don't know what you'd call that, my lady. I call it earning my place. Not a performance, not wit for its own sake, just the plain recitation of what she had actually done, laid on the table like a ledger itself. And it landed harder than any clever retort could have. The Duke, at the head of the table, set down his glass. "Miss Hollis," he said, "has saved this estate more in 4 years than most men manage in a lifetime of stewardship. I'd remind the table of that before it forgets itself again." Lady Beatrice did not answer. She reached for her wine instead, and the room recalibrated around her silence, slowly the way a field settles after a stone is thrown into it. Later, in the corridor, Ivy found the Duke waiting near the gallery, beneath the portrait of his late wife. "You didn't need to say that," she told him. "I know," he said. "I wanted to. There's a difference." "There is," he agreed, and for once he let the almost smile finish itself into something whole, brief as a struck match, and gone before either of them could name it. That summer, the fraud thread pulled tighter, though neither of them yet had the whole shape of it. Ivy found a discrepancy in the timber accounts too precise to be error. 8%, consistently, skimmed off every sale for the better part of a decade, routed through a shipping factor, whose name appeared nowhere else in the estate's records. She said nothing to Pratt. She began keeping her own copies of every figure she touched, in a second hand, in a locked drawer, whose key she wore on a cord beneath her collar. The Duke, for his part, had begun keeping something of his own close. A letter arrived that spring from a distant cousin named Reginald Corby, inquiring with elaborate courtesy after the state of the Ashworth accounts, and whether his Grace had considered that a house without an heir of the blood might benefit from closer oversight. The Duke burned the letter. He told no one, not even Ivy, believing the danger too distant and himself too capable of managing it alone. It was the first small dishonesty of omission he had ever offered her, and it would cost him more than he guessed. That August, on the terrace at dusk, Ivy found him standing before the gallery's newest edition, not a portrait, but a small locked case containing his late wife Cecilia's letters, unopened in 11 years. "You never read them," she said. "I couldn't," he said. "For a long time I thought if I opened them I would have to feel the whole of it at once, rather than in pieces I could survive. And now? Now I find I can look at the case without flinching. I couldn't do that a year ago." He turned the key over once in his fingers, did not open it. "You did that, not the reading, just the looking, without flinching." "That's not nothing," she said quietly. "No," he said, "it is not." He almost said more. She watched him almost say it, watched the sentence gather behind his eyes and then fold itself back down, unspoken, and she did not push, because she had learned long ago that some doors open faster if you stand still in front of them rather than pull. "I should go over the timber figures again," she said instead. "Something in them still doesn't sit right. It rarely does," he said, "when you're the one looking." She left him with the locked case and the unopened letters, and neither of them named what had almost happened between them on that terrace, though both carried it inside for days afterward, like a coal banked under ash, not out, only waiting. The blow came in October, faster than either of them had braced for. Pratt had known for weeks that Ivy's private ledger existed. A careless word from a clerk, an unlocked drawer left ajar one evening, was enough. He did not confront her. He went, instead, to Reginald Corby, and together they built something worse than a confrontation, a petition. It arrived at Ashworth Hall on a wet Tuesday, delivered by a clerk in Chancery black, and it accused the Duke of Ashworth of gross financial mismanagement, citing forged correspondence, falsified rent rolls, and a debt of some £11,000 that did not exist anywhere in Ivy's true accounts, but existed, in convincing and identical hand, in Pratt's second book. It requested the estate be placed into commission, seized, administered by the Crown's appointed officer, pending a hearing in 4 weeks' time. The appointed officer, by convenient coincidence, would be a friend of Corby's choosing. 4 weeks, the Duke said, reading it twice, then a third time, as though the words might rearrange themselves into something survivable. 4 weeks is enough, Ivy said, though her hands, for the first time in years, were not entirely steady. "Ivy, I have 3 years of true figures locked in that drawer," she said. "I have witnessed correspondence. I have a shipping factor's name that appears nowhere Pratt meant it to appear. It's enough. It has to be enough." He was quiet a long moment. "There is something I should have told you in the spring," he said. "A letter from Corby. I burned it. I thought I could handle him alone." She looked at him, and something colder than anger moved through her. Not fury, but the flatter, more exhausting disappointment of finding a cracking ground she'd trusted to hold. "You should have told me," she said. "I keep the numbers. I can't defend what I don't know is under attack." "I know," he said. "I am telling you now." "Now might not be enough either," she said. and left him standing in the library with the petition still in his hand, and neither of them slept that night. In separate wings of a house that had never before felt quite so large. The hearing was held in the county assembly rooms 4 weeks later, before a commissioner sent down from London, and a gallery packed with everyone in Wiltshire who had ever wanted to see a duke brought low. Josiah Pratt sat with Reginald Corby's solicitor, composed, respectable, a man who had spent 9 years learning exactly how to look trustworthy. Ivy Hollis walked in carrying a single locked case. She was called first, not as a witness, but at her own quiet insistence, over the objection of Corby's counsel, who argued a bookkeeper's testimony was hardly material to a question of the estate's solvency. I would say, the Commissioner replied, that a bookkeeper's testimony is precisely material to a question of solvency. Miss Price, proceed. Miss Hollis. She opened the case. She laid out 3 years of parallel ledgers, her own hand beside the estate's official books, discrepancy by discrepancy, each one dated, each one witnessed by Mrs. Prynne's signature or a clerk's initials where she had thought to gather them. She laid out the timber accounts, the 8% skim, the shipping factor's name, traced, through 6 weeks of careful inquiry she had told no one about, to an account held jointly by that factor and Josiah Pratt. The debt cited in this petition, she said, does not exist in any ledger I have kept for 4 years, verified quarterly, and cross, signed by the estate's own clerks. It exists only in a second set of books kept by Mr. Pratt, in ink that a chemist in Salisbury will confirm for the court is no more than 8 months old, considerably younger than the transactions it claims to record. The room had gone very still. Pratt's composure did not break all at once. It went the way ice goes on a slow river, a crack first, quiet, then a widening no one could stop. I would remind the Commission, Ivy said, that I did not come here to accuse a man of malice. I came to show you numbers. The numbers accuse him. I only read them aloud. Corby's solicitor tried once more, weakly, to suggest collusion between the ward and the Duke. It was the Duke who answered that, rising from where he sat, his voice even and carrying. Miss Hollis has managed this estate's accounts since she was 16 years old, he said. I did not teach her to find fraud. She taught herself, because she has never in her life trusted a number she could not verify with her own hand. If there is collusion here, Mr. Price, I would look to the 2 men sharing a factor's account, not to the woman who exposed it. Pratt broke before the Commissioner asked him to. It was not dramatic. He simply stopped defending himself, put his hands flat on the table in front of him, and admitted, in a voice gone suddenly small, that the second ledger was his, that the debt was invented, that Corby had promised him a percentage of the estate's sale once it passed into commission. The Commissioner dismissed the petition within the hour. Corby was barred from the county's courts, pending a fraud inquiry of his own. Pratt was given the choice of transportation or restitution, and a quiet removal from every parish in Wiltshire. He chose the latter, and left Ashworth that same week older than his years, offering Ivy before he went. The closest thing to an apology his narrow nature could produce. You were always better at the books than I let myself believe, he said. I know, Ivy said, and did not soften it, but did not gloat either. It was simply true, and she had learned long ago that the truth needed no decoration. The estate was safe. The debt was ash. It was 3 days before the Duke found the words for what came after. He found her in the estate office, past dusk, the same room where a 12-year-old girl had once asked why the West tenancy paid more than the East. She was closing the true ledger for the night, the pencil stub, still hers, still carried, decades worn now to almost nothing, set beside it. "I owe you an apology," he said, "for the letter I burned. I told myself I was protecting you. I was only protecting myself from having to say I was afraid. Afraid of what? Of losing the one thing in this house I have never once had to manage or protect," he said. "You have never needed rescuing, Ivy. Not from Bramfield, not from Pratt, not from Corby's commission. I have watched you save yourself and this estate both, and I find I have nothing left to offer you that you require." "That's not true," she said quietly. "You gave me a pencil stub's worth of dignity in a market square when I was 8 years old and no one else in that county would look at me. I've spent 15 years trying to be worth that." "You were worth it the day I met you," he said. "I only lacked the courage to say so until you'd proven it to a commissioner instead of to me." "Say it now," she said, plainly. "I don't want performance. I want the truth, the way you taught me to want it in a ledger." "I love you," he said. "I have for longer than either of us has been honest enough to name." She did not answer with a speech. She crossed the room and took his hand, the way she might close a column that had finally, after years, come out even, and he did not pull her closer so much as let her arrive, and for a long moment neither of them said anything at all, because some totals do not need to be read aloud to be understood. "I am not accepting you out of need," she said finally. "I want that understood, the way I wanted the allowance refused, all those years ago. I have my own name now, my own trade. I could keep books for any house in England and want for nothing." "I know," he said. "It is exactly why I am asking." 5 years passed the way good years do, quickly, and without much need of telling. Ashworth Hall prospered under 2 hands instead of 1, its tenancies fairly assessed, its timber accounts audited each season by a woman who trusted no number she had not verified herself. The Duchess, for that was what the county now called her, though she still kept the estate's books herself every quarter, refusing to hand the pencil to a clerk, opened a school in Bramfield the year after her marriage, on the very square where she had once been called a thief for a crust of bread she had never stolen. She named it for no one but the children who attended it, and she taught the older ones to keep accounts themselves. Because she believed, more than anything else she had learned in her life, that a girl who could read a ledger could never again be told a false story about her own worth. Lady Beatrice Sorrel, of all people, became one of the school's more reliable patrons. She never quite apologised in words. She simply began, each spring, sending a purse for the youngest pupil's shoes, and once, at a dinner, referred to Ivy as our Duchess with something that might have been the beginning of respect. Josiah Pratt was never heard from again. Reginald Corby died some years later, his fraud inquiry unresolved, his name a quiet warning told to young men who mistook cleverness for cunning. The Duke's almost smile, over those 5 years, thawed by degrees into something the household saw often now, and once, at their daughter's christening, into a laugh so unguarded that Mrs. Prynne swore afterwards she nearly dropped the infant from the shock of hearing it. Ivy kept the pencil stub still, in a drawer of her own desk now, beside the first ledger she had ever balanced for Ashworth. She did not need it any more. She kept it the way a person keeps the first stone of a foundation, not because the house still depends on it, but because it is where the house began. She was not a rescue. She had never been a charity case. She had been, from the first Market Square morning to the last column of the last ledger, a woman who built her own worth in numbers no one could argue with, and then let herself, finally, be loved for it. That was the whole of it. And it was enough. And it was everything. If Ivy's pencil stub and her stubborn, steady ledgers found their way into your heart today, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss where her school and this house go next. And I'd love to know, tell me in the comments which moment felt like the real turning point to you. The market square, the dinner table, or the courtroom. And while you're there, let me know what city you're watching from. I want to see how far Ivy's story travels. Another one, just as stubborn and just as worth staying for, is waiting for you soon.